Shchenim, Chapter 4. 1. The following rules apply when a person owns a loft that is situated above a house belonging to a colleague. If one of the walls of the house falls, the owner of the loft is not required to pay any of the costs incurred by the owner of the house in repairing it, and he may compel the owner of the house to repair it as it was originally. If, by contrast, one of the walls of the loft falls, the owner of the house cannot compel the owner of the loft to repair it. The ceiling is the responsibility of the owner of the house. The plaster above it is the responsibility of the owner of the loft. 2. If both the house and the loft fall, both owners share equally in the wood, the stones, and the sand. If some of the stones were broken, we determine which of the stones were more likely to have broken, the stones of the house or the stones of the loft. This can be determined the manner in which the stones fell, whether the upper stones fell and the lower stones destroyed them, or the lower stones slipped out and the upper stones fell and were destroyed. If it cannot be determined how the stones fell, both the whole stones and the broken stones should be divided equally. 3. The following will apply when both structures fell and the owner of the loft tells the owner of the house to rebuild his home, so he can build his loft upon it, but the owner of that home refuses to do so. The owner of the loft may rebuild the home to its original size and live inside it until the owner of the home reimburses him for all his costs. Then he must leave, and he may build his loft upon it if he desires. 4. If neither of them is able to rebuild, the building of the owner of the loft receives 1/3 of the land, and the owner of the house receives 2/3 of the land. 5. The owner of the house desires to rebuild his home, he should rebuild it as it was originally. The following must apply if he desires to change the structure of the walls. If he desires to strengthen them and increase their width beyond the previous measures, his desire is heeded. If he desires to make them narrower or weaker, e.g. originally he had been made from stone, now he wants to make them from bricks, his desire is not heeded. If he desires to build the ceiling with heavier and stronger beams, his desire is heeded. If he desires to make them narrower than they were originally, his desire is not heeded. If he desires to add more windows or increase the height of the house, his desire is not heeded. If he desires to reduce the number of windows, diminish the height of the house, his desire is heeded. Similarly, the owner of the loft should rebuild it as it was originally. If he desires to change the structure of the walls to increase their width and strengthen them, but his desire is not heeded because he places an additional burden on the lower walls. If he desires to make them narrower, his desire is heeded. Similarly, with regard to the beams of the ceiling of the loft, if he desires to exchange them for the lighter ones, his desire is heeded. If he desires to use heavier beams, his desire is not heeded. If he desires to add more windows, diminish the height of the loft, his desire is heeded. If he desires to reduce the number of windows or increase the height of the loft, his desire is not heeded. 6. The following will apply when the beams of the ceiling is lower and descend into the space of the house. If they reach within 10 handbreadths of the ground, the owner of the house may destroy and rebuild the entire structure. If they do not reach that low, the owner of the loft may prevent him from doing so. Even if the owner of the house tells the owner of the loft, I'll rent to another place to live in until I repair the ceiling, his desire is not heeded. For the owner of the loft will tell him, I do not want difficulty moving from place to place so that you can repair your home. 7. If an agreement was made between the two of them that as long as the house is high enough that a person can enter while carrying an ordinary size burden on his head, the owner may not tear it down, despite the fact that the beam have bent lower than the ordinary height. If, however, he cannot enter while carrying such a burden unless he bends his head, he may tear it down, repair it, and rebuild it. Then the owner of the loft may not prevent him, for this was the agreement they made at the outset. 8. The following rule applies when an olive press is built in the midst of a mountain, a garden is located upon it, and then on top of the olive press becomes open 4 handbreadths or more. The owner of the garden may descend and sow the earth of the olive press until the owner of the olive press makes a covering of the olive press, so the owner of the higher property can restore the earth of his garden. And so 9. The following will apply when there are 2 gardens, one on top of the other on the slope of the mountain, and there are vegetables growing on the surface of the earth. Between them, many vegetables to which the owner of the higher property can extend his hand and pull by the roots belong to him, provided he does not strain himself. The remainder belongs to the owner of the lower property. If the owner of the higher property can reach the leaves of the vegetables but cannot reach the roots, he should not take them. If however he does take them, they should not be expropriated from his possession. Different laws apply with regard to a tree that stands in the boundary between 2 properties, even though he leans into the field belonging to one of them, both of them divide the fruit. 10. The following supply if a river washes away olive trees belong to one person and plants them in a field belonging to another. If the owner of the tree says, I want to take my olive trees, his desire is not heeded in order that the land be settled. Instead, they should remain in their place. If the river uproots the trees together with their earth when it replants them, the owner of the field and the owner of the olive tree should divide the fruit of the first 3 years. After the 3 years, all the produce belongs to the owner of the field. If the tree was not uprooted together with the earth, the owner of the field is entitled to the entire benefit immediately. 11. Similar concepts apply when a person sells his olive trees to be used as wood. If the agreement was that he would cut them down immediately, all the fruit they produce belongs to the owner of the land. If the agreement was that he could cut them down whenever he desires, all the fruit they produce belongs to the owner of the trees. The following will apply if the tree were sold without any specific agreement. If they produce no more than revius per saw beyond the cost involved, they belong to the owner of the olive trees. If they produce more than revius per saw beyond the cost involved, they should be divided. Hallchot Shchenim, Chapter 5. 1. When a court is jointly owned by partners, each one may compel the other to build a gatekeeper's room, a door, and any other element that is sorely needed for a court or anything that is customary for the local people to build. He cannot compel with regard to other matters, paintings and designs and the like. If one of the partners in the court made such an addition of his own initiative and the other demonstrated that he appreciated what his colleague did, he is held responsible for his share of the entire project, must pay his portion of the cost. 2. When a person has a house in another court besides the one in which he lives, the inhabitants of the court in which he does not live can force him to contribute towards building of a door, a bolt, and a lock. However, he cannot be compelled to contribute to other matters. If he dwells with them in the court, he can be forced to contribute to everything. 3. Maybe this has to do with dual citizenship. 3. One of the owners of a house in the courtyard seeks to put an animal or a mill in the courtyard or to raise chickens there. His colleagues can prevent him from doing so. Similarly, with regard to other things that people are not accustomed to doing in their courtyards, the partners can prevent him from doing this. There is an exception to doing laundry, for it's not the custom of the daughters of Israel to shame themselves by doing laundry at the riverside. 4. A courtyard owned jointly by several owners or a lane that ends in a cul-de-sac. All the inhabitants of the lane or the courtyard can restrain one of their numbers so that he makes use of the lane only in a manner which the other people living in that courtyard make use of lanes. 5. If one of the partners of a courtyard put an animal in the middle of the lake into a courtyard and the other partner did not protest against him, he would prevent him from doing so at any time. If he erected a partition 10 handbreadths high in front of the animal of the lake, he has established his claim to it. For partners will protest if one erects a partition, since the partner did not protest, but instead allow the partition to remain, he forgoes his right to protest. Wednesday will apply in a courtyard that is jointly owned by partners. If, however, a person places an animal in a courtyard belonging to another person, even if it erects a partition, he has not established his claim to it, for it is known the owner only lent him the space. Similar laws apply if one brought an oven and arranged raised chickens alike. This is certainly the law. For one would say that the visitor establishes his claim to the space, the person will never lend the space to a colleague. 6. If one of the partners in a courtyard desires to open up a new window from his house overlooking the courtyard, his colleague may prevent him from doing so, for this allows him the possibility of looking at him at all times. If he opens such a window, he must close it. Similarly, partners in a courtyard should not open the entrance to the house opposite the entrance of a colleague's house, or a window opposite a colleague's window. In the public domain, because a person may open an entrance opposite a colleague's entrance and a window opposite the colleague's window. If the colleague would protest, he can tell, I'm just like one of the people in the public domain who sees you. This was different than the halacha by the roofs. Okay. 7. Nevertheless, even in the public domain, a person should not open up a store opposite the entrance to a colleague's courtyard, for this represents an ongoing damage. Passerby in the public domain go to and fro. This person will in a store the entire day and look at his colleague's entrance. 8. One of the partners in the courtyard purchases a home in another courtyard. He may not open an entrance from his new home into the courtyard that he shares. Even if he built a loft over his home, he is not entitled to open a new entrance for it to his courtyard, for he is making a passage to the courtyard slower. It is different on other partners in the courtyard. There's only one neighbor, and suddenly they were given many neighbors. One may, however, build an entrance to the loft within one's own home, and if a person desires to divide his apartment into two, he may. 9. From this, one may deduce that if one of the partners of the courtyard brings people from another house to his house, partners in the courtyard may prevent him from doing so because he makes passage through the courtyard slower. Similarly, if a person rents his house to the master of another household who later brings his relatives and friends to dwell with him together in one house, the owner who rents out the house can prevent him from doing so. 10. If the entrance to a courtyard from the home of one of the partners was small, he may not enlarge it. If another partner may protest, when your entrance is small, I can hide from you when making use of the courtyard. I cannot hide from you when your entrance is large. Similarly, if a person has a large entrance, he may not divide it into two. For another person may protest, I'm able to hide myself when there is only one entrance. If there are two entrances, I will not be able to hide myself. 11. When regardless, a person has a small entrance from his house to the public domain, he desires to enlarge it, or he has a wide entrance he would like to divide into two. The person lives opposite him and needs to say the people in the public domain cannot prevent it from doing so. 12. The inhabitants of the lane may compel each other to share in the construction of a pole or a beam for the lane. 13. When a person has an entrance from his private domain to a lane, the inhabitants of the lane do not have the right to compel him to erect a gate for that entrance to the lane, for he can tell them, I want to enter, carry my burden up to my entrance. When the lane entrances the public domain at either of its ends, the inhabitants of the lane desire to erect gates to the entrance to the lane. The people of the public domain prevent them from doing so, for at times people in the public domain are pressed for space and enter the lane. 14. When a person seeks to open an entrance from his home to a lane that ends in a cul-de-sac, inhabitants of the lane prevent him from doing so because he takes passage through the courtyard slower. If the lane has openings to the public domain on either side, he may at outset open any opening he desires. 15. If a person has an entrance to his home that has been closed in a lane that ends in a cul-de-sac, he may open it at any time. If however he had destroyed the door frames, the inhabitants of the lane can prevent him from doing so. Similarly, if one of the inhabitants of a lane desires to close the entrance to his home and transfer it to another lane, the inhabitants in the first lane prevent him from doing so, for perhaps tax will be levied against the lane. The presence of another person reduces the share of the tax each of the inhabitants of the lane must pay. Accordingly, when there is no fixed tax levied on the inhabitants of the lane, the person may close his entrance whenever he desires. 16. The following laws apply when there are 5 courtyards to open up to a lane ending in a cul-de-sac. All the inhabitants of the court use their portion of the lane near the outer courtyard, while the inhabitants of the outer courtyard use only the portion of the lane near their own property. Similarly, the inhabitants of the second courtyard use the portion of the lane near their own property and the outer courtyard, but do not use the portion of the lane near the others. Thus, the inhabitants of the innermost courtyard use the portion of the lane near all the others, as well as that near their own property. Therefore, if the owner of the second courtyard built a bench in front of his entrance blocking it, the owner of the outer courtyard may not prevent him from doing so. The inhabitants of the inner courtyard may prevent him from doing so, for he is lengthening their path, making them walk around the bench. Similarly, if the owner of the second courtyard opens a second entrance between his courtyard and the outer courtyard, the owner of the outer courtyard may not prevent him from doing so, for he is allowed to use only the land that is outside that entrance. If, however, the owner of the second courtyard opens the second entrance between his courtyard and the third courtyard, the owners of the inner courtyard may prevent him from doing so, for the owner of the second courtyard is allowed to use only the land that is in the lane that is outside his first entrance and to its exterior. The same laws apply with regard to all other owners. Shekhenim, chapter 6:1. The inhabitants of a city may compel each other to participate in the building of a wall, gates to a bolt, to build a synagogue for the inhabitants, and to purchase a Torah scroll and a scroll for the prophets and writings, so that any member of the community who desires may read from it. 2. When a person buys a city in Eretz Yisrael, the court may compel him to purchase a path to the city from all 4 directions for the sake of the settlement of Eretz Yisrael. People who own fields among a stretch of fields in a valley may compel each other to dig a trench and a small trench around the valley. 3. Although a person owns a courtyard in one city, he also owns property in another city. The inhabitants of the latter city can compel him to participate in the digging of cisterns, caverns, and irrigation ditches. He is not, however, compelled to join other communal matters. If he dwells together with them in that city, he is compelled to participate in all matters. 4. When a levy is placed upon a city's inhabitants for the construction of the levy is made according to the proximity of the houses to the wall. Those whose homes are close to the wall must pay more. 5, whenever a person lives in a city for 12 months or buys his dwelling there, he must contribute together with all the inhabitants of the city for the improvements that must be made, e.g., the walls, the gates, the wages of the soldiers who guard the city, and all similar matters that are necessary for the protection of the city. 6, payment for all things necessary for the protection of the city is collected from all its inhabitants, even from orphans, with the exception of Torah scholars. For Torah scholars do not require protection, for their Torah study protects them. Payment for the improvement of the thoroughfares in the streets, by contrast, collected even from the scholars. If people go out and fix the streets themselves, the Torah scholars should not go out to work with them, for it is not the practice of Torah scholars to demean themselves in the presence of common people. 7, if the inhabitants of the city contracted workers to dig a river to bring water to a city, we collect even from orphans, for this is to their benefit, so that their fields and vineyards are watered. Therefore, if it transpires that despite the work, the water did not come, since the orphans did not benefit, everything that was taken from them should be returned to them. Same laws apply in all analogous situations. 8, the inhabitants of a lane can compel each other to prevent a tailor or leather craftsman or any other craftsman from opening a business in a lane. If a craftsman lived inside of a lane and no protest was lodged against his practice of his craft, or there was a bathhouse or a store or a mill in a lane, another person came and built another bathhouse opposite it or built another lane, the owner of the first establishment cannot prevent him claiming or destroying my livelihood. This applies even if he comes from another lane, but his trade is already practiced in this lane. If whoever is from another city comes to establish a store next to a person's store or a bathhouse next to this person's bathhouse, they can prevent him from doing so. If whoever he pays the head tax of the king together with them, they cannot prevent him from establishing his business. 9, when perfume merchants travel from city to city, the inhabitants of the city may not prevent them from selling their wares. For as one of the ordinances established by Ezra, for these merchants travel in this manner, so that the perfume will be easily available for Jewish women. They may not, however, establish a fixed place where they sit and sell the wares unless the inhabitants of the city consent. If whoever a merchant is a Torah scholar, he may establish a fixed place wherever he desires. 10, when merchants bring their wares to sell in cities, the inhabitants of the city may prevent them from doing so. If whoever they would sell their wares only on the market day, they cannot prevent them, provided they sell their wares only in the marketplace. They may not, however, go from door to door selling them even on the market day. If they have an outstanding loan in the city, they are permitted to sell what is necessary for them for their lives. They even on days other than market day, people are paid their loan and move on. 11, one of the inhabitants of a lane that enters a cul-de-sac desires to open a profession as a bull letter, a weaver, a teacher of Gentile children. The inhabitants of the lane may prevent him from increasing the number of people coming in and going out of the lane. Similarly, a person who owns a house in a courtyard share, but others may not rent it to a Jewish, rent it to a doctor, a blood letter weaver, a Jewish scribe who writes legal contracts, or a teacher of Gentile children. 12, when a store is located in a courtyard, the neighbors can protest, tell the owner we cannot sleep because of the noise made by the people going in and out. Instead, he should perform his work at home and sell it in the marketplace. They may not, however, protest against him and say, we cannot sleep because the noise made by your hammer or your mill, for he has already established his right to perform these activities. Similarly, a person may teach Jewish children Torah in his house. The other partners of the lane may not protest against him, saying we cannot sleep because of the noise made by the school children. 13, when one person owns a cistern within a house belonging to a colleague, he may enter only when it is custom for people to enter, or must depart when it is custom for people to depart. He may not bring his animal through his colleague's home, provide him with water for the cistern. Instead, he should fill up buckets with water and water it outside. They are both entitled to make a lock for the entrance to the cistern, the owner of the cistern to protect his water, and the owner of the home because of his suspicion concerning his wife, so that she will not be able to enter there only when he knows. 14, when one person owns a garden whose entrance is within a garden belongs to a colleague, he may enter only when it's customary for people to enter and depart. When it's customary for people to depart, he may not bring merchants to his colleague's garden, nor may he enter it to go to another field. The owner of the outer garden may sow vegetables on the path. If they both agree to move the path to the side of the garden, the owner of the inner garden may enter or depart when he desires. He may bring a merchant in. He may not, however, enter to go into another field. Either of the parties can prevent the other from sowing vegetables in the path that was placed on the side.